You are listening to The Underground Subway with host David Alston, a podcast dedicated to giving you the strategies to live a free and better life. Here is David Alston.
Hi, I'm David Alston, host of The Underground Subway. Welcome to this podcast that is dedicated to one thing. It's dedicated to giving you the tools and strategies needed to live a better and purposeful life. My friends, no matter where you are, where you're going, or what you've been through, life will always throw you a curveball, but guess what? The Underground Subway has a purpose, and that purpose is to give you the strategies needed to be successful. Life always has a GPS system, and on that GPS system, it will tell you where you're going, how long it's going to take you to get there, and what are the plans needed, the roads that you need to take to get there. Well, my friend, that's what the Underground Subway is. It is your GPS system. We're dedicated to giving you every tool, every strategy, utilizing all of our wisdom and expertise, bringing you quality and qualified guests to get the job done. Excited about my guest for this edition of the Underground Subway? Let me tell you a little bit about my guest. My guest is Dr. David M. Walker. Dr. Walker is a professional leader, former New York City school administrator, pastor, and NCAA Division I basketball college referee who empowers faith leaders to overcome obstacles and develop success strategies by the way of his new book, which is entitled The Champion's Mind: How to Defeat Giants and Win. And his keynote presentation in his book, Dr. Walker helps readers hone in on how to master their gifts, be fearless, cultivate relentless leadership, communicate effectively, gauge and build their character, see more God clearly, and recognize the dark side of things. Through his strategies, Dr. Walker helps readers overcome fears, doubts, and insecurities to be the leaders they were meant to be. My good friend, lifelong friend, Dr. David M. Walker. Thank you, my friend, for joining the Underground Subway. Thank you so much.
Well, David, I am just so happy to be on the show today, and I'm looking forward to a great conversation.
All right, let's get started. But before we get started, a little, I mentioned in the bio, I mentioned in the introduction, lifelong friend. I've been knowing you for my entire life, as long as I've known myself. But and I often talk to you about what a tremendous inspiration your dad played in my life in regards to music and my love for music. Your dad was perhaps the greatest trombone player I've ever come across in my life. But it really just slipped my mind until recently what a major influence your grandmother had in my life. She was assistant pastor of the church. She was just one of those matriarchs that stretched beyond the boundaries of her family into everyone else's. So I forgot all about it. I mean, how dare I forget the great elder Martha Culbreath.
Yeah. And, quite well, obviously, I have not ever forgotten my grandmother, but I have in recent months, especially since I started writing the book because of the role she played in it. I have been talking about her and introducing her to everyone. Mm-hmm. And everyone is quite surprised. And of course, obviously, you have known her many years ago as we grew up in Philadelphia. But I'm now letting everyone know that I got a grandma named Martha Culbreath.
Yes. And Aunt Clarabelle.
And Aunt Clarabelle, that's right.
Yeah. Let's talk about this book, man. We're all excited and so proud of this work that you've done, The Champion's Mind: How to Defeat Giants and Win. Let's talk about that book. What inspired the idea for your new book?
Well, you've already introduced her. Clearly, it was my grandmother who is the inspiration for the book. I dedicated the book to her. And here's how she inspired me to write. And I'll tell the story in the introduction of the book. When I was born in March of 1960. And, before there were sonograms or gender reveal parties, my parents didn't know what gender I would be but they had already decided what my name was going to be, and they wanted to name me Michael. And of course, my mother was excited that she had finally come up with a name, and she wanted everyone to know, and especially her mother, my grandmother Martha. She definitely wanted her to be among the first to know. So when my mother goes to her and says, "Ma, if I have another son, I have an older brother named Robert." She said, "If I have another son, we're going to name him Michael." And as my mother is telling me the story, she says that my grandmother looked my mother directly in the eye and she said, "His name will be David. For David was a king, David killed Goliath, and David was a great man. And my grandson, who will be named David, will be a great man." And
Wow.
every time I tell that story, David, um, I feel some emotions run through me because what it tells me is that my grandmother was talking to God about me before I got here,
Right.
and her and God had decided what my name was going to be because my mother, I guess, was inspired. My grandmother was inspired about the biblical character David. She saw him as a great man, and she put that on me. She had given me what I call this marker for success to be
Hmm.
someone great. So and of course, growing up with the name David, maybe you've experienced this yourself. I've always been related to the biblical character. Every time somebody find out my
Right. That's
name is
right.
David, they go right to the Bible.
Uh huh.
And so, because I grew up with him, one day I was going through the scriptures, and I said, "Wait a minute, this fella was a winner at everything that he did." And so that's how I began to write the book. But I would actually give my grandmother the credit for the inspiration of writing the book because now in this book, I really talk about how much the biblical character David was a winner.
Okay. Well, Doc, you've been in church. You like me, you've been in church your entire life. We grew up in church. We grew up in an era of church where it's totally different from now. Now, the way church is, you go to church on Sunday and you got the praise team and they're going to sing songs of inspiration. They're going to sing worship songs. But back in the day, quote unquote, back in the day, things were different. We had testimony service, and we had the two testimony leaders sitting there at the front table with the
Yes,
fans and
yes.
everything. They had a fan, and you couldn't lead testimony without a fan and a tambourine, and then we had something different. We had something that you don't see a lot of now as much as you did in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. We had Sunday school. And so growing up
That's
in
right.
church
That's
with
right.
Sunday school, you heard about biblical characters all the time. And so you grew up
Right.
in church listening to the story of David. So you heard
Yes.
all about David. My question is, growing up in church, hearing about David and Goliath and writing your book, how much research did you really have to do on this character in order to write this book?
Well, obviously, I had a strong foundation into who he was for obvious reasons because you grow up hearing about him and knowing his story. And I've read about David, obviously, previously in my life, but in the last couple years, it was just something that I really had not seen about him. And so, therefore, I had to go into the scriptures to really find out about him. And I read about him. And as I said, I saw that he was, most people know him as a giant slayer. He slayed the giant. Everybody knows that story about him, but they don't know how much he was a winner and an overcomer of just not the giant, but other things, and how he won and how he was successful. And so, obviously, you would go into the scriptures to read. I've read other books that talked about David and Goliath to get a little bit more history behind him. And after I came up with, what I felt was enough information about him, I started writing. And of course, my purpose of my book is trying to uh, get everyone to see that in one way or another, we are all a David.
Okay.
That's whether your name is David or not, we are all a David. And I quoted Malcolm Gladwell in the book where he said that we all face challenges that force us to respond.
Mm.
You hear what I said? We all face challenges and obstacles that force us to respond. So that's why I say we are all a David, and whether we're famous or unknown, everyone is a David because we all have to overcome obstacles. Obstacles are presented in front of us, challenges are presented in front of us. And the question is, how will you respond when the giant shows up?
Wow. Wow. How will you respond? So you're saying the giant will show up, not that there's a possibility that you're going to face a giant. Eventually, you're going to face a giant in your life. And you're
Everything in our life,
go ahead.
yeah, everything in our lives at one point or another presents itself as an obstacle, a challenge. And I'm using the
Mm-hmm.
word giant because that's exactly what they are. Whether they're big or small, they're still obstacles and challenges that you have to overcome. You cannot live this life without facing obstacles, challenges, and giants. And you
Right.
cannot win without overcoming them. We did a book launch, and I remember saying that night is that, people want victory, but they don't want an opponent.
Wow.
Yeah, they want they want to raise their hand victory and say, yeah, I won, but they don't want an opponent. And I'm here to tell you that you cannot win without first having an opponent, an opposition, a challenge. There is nothing in your life where you consider yourself a winner, where you have not faced an opponent before you raise your hand in victory.
Wow. 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 Can you repeat that one more time? I really want us to get that. You cannot win without an opponent.
Without an opponent. Without an
Wow.
opponent.
Wow.
And I use the illustration of Michael Jordan because everyone knows the Michael Jordan. Every time Michael Jordan won a championship, he would put up a finger, a number finger, right?
Right. Right.
1, 2, right? He would
Right.
jump up on the stage and
Yes.
hold up the finger of whatever number he won 6 championships. So he did it 6 different times.
Uh-huh.
But he never put up his hands in victory until he first won the game.
Mm-hmm.
You don't raise your hands before the game. You don't put up the trophy before the game. It's after you defeat the giant, then you have the right to hold up the trophy.
That's right. Well, Dr. Walker, you talk about the opposition and you talk about facing the giants, and there throughout the Bible, there are probably tons and tons of characters that have faced opposition. What made you choose David? Was it just the name, or was it the fact that he was the obvious choice?
It was clearly he was the obvious choice because again, growing up, I've embodied him,
Mm-hmm.
and again, and at the end of the story, at the end of the book, in my conclusion, I even tell this story about a couple of young men that I had met in my neighborhood. They were young entrepreneurs. They started a business. I got to know them. They got to know me. We had a similar faith, the same faith. And one day I went to the store just to go get something to eat. And while I was standing in line, one of the guys that's the owner, he saw me standing in line and he yells out in front of everybody, "Hey, King David."
Mm-hmm.
So,
Wow.
so the point that I'm trying to make was I've lived my life constantly being connected with him. And I
Mm-hmm.
said, if I'm going to write about obstacles and overcoming, I don't think that there's anyone who I should write about because I consider David the greatest overcomer ever in history. And I stand on that.
Recently, someone asked me, they said, well, we've heard about your lineage, your family tree, and your relationship with Harriet Tubman. And they asked me, they said, well, if you're related to Harriet Tubman, tell me something about Harriet Tubman that no one knows and no one has ever bothered to find out.
Mm.
And so I had to share with them some things that I had found out that most people probably didn't know about her. But tell us about David, something that David in David's life, because when you read the Bible, you may just read over it And I guess any good Bible scholar will tell you that you have to read between the lines,
Right.
which means you do your research. We all know David was a child of Jesse. He was
Hmm.
out in the field. He slew the giant. He slew the lion. He slew the bear. He grew up. He wrote Psalms. He had a son named Solomon. Tell us something about David that we didn't know.
Well, obviously he's well known, right? So everyone knows him. But obviously in the book, what I tried to do, there's one part about David where I talk about, if I may, in like chapter 1. You know, people talk about how David. We know he was a harpist, right? But I write about how David was someone who mastered his talents and his ability. He was not just a person who pulled out the harp and started playing. He mastered his talents. And that's why he became someone who got called or summoned to solve Saul's problem, because he mastered his talents. Now, let me just also add this. Most people only know him as the giant slayer, but he was a person of character. He was a person he was well spoken. He was articulate. He was able to express himself. Everybody knows that he had a relationship with God, but there's just so many things, and I tried to outline those things in David in my book. So there's nothing that I would say that I could think of that would come to mind that's not known about him. But what I tried to really do was to highlight those things that people may not know in terms of, like I said, his character, his
Mhm.
his his ability, his articulation of speech. Again, the scripture says he was well spoken. And then I talk about how David was really brave, and he was a warrior. And again, the thing that I'm getting out of writing in my book is that most people just know that he beat the giant. But the thing, I guess, to answer your question is that no one really knows how much he was successful at living life, successful at accomplishing his goals. He was determined and dedicated. He was driven to succeed. So it was more than just that one encounter with the giant when he knocked him down with the stone and cut off his head. David was, obviously, I would say he was the epitome of how we should live life.
You mentioned talents. You mentioned
Hmm.
that David was talented. Is there a
Yeah.
difference between, if you want to take some time to talk about what each one is, that's fine. But is there a difference between what we call a gift, a person is gifted, and a talent?
I think that if you take the time, you can parse out that there are differences between your gift, your talent, and an ability. However, in my book, what I chose to do, because I wanted people to have a just a clear cut read. I didn't want it to be, heavily theological, because I wasn't targeting preachers.
Hmm.
So to break it down. So what I did was I decided to say that we are all born with a gift, and the gift and I use all three terms: gift, talent, and ability. Here's a perfect example. LeBron James is an excellent basketball player, and some would say that's his gift, it's a talent, and that's his ability.
Hmm.
So I use them interchangeably because I didn't want to get into the weeds in this particular book, because I was not intending writing to scholars or preachers, where, because you can go through the biblical witness and you could probably break down, talents, abilities, passion, all those different things. But I said that the gift that God gives you is the thing that you're most passionate about, and that's something that you do that no one else can do exactly like you. That's the gift that God has given to you.
Let's talk about the actual book process now. We talked about David. We talked about the foundation of it. We talked about the character. We talked about you and your connection to the character. Let's talk about that actual book writing process, if we can. What part of writing this book did you find to be the most difficult? What part of the book did you have the most difficult time writing?
I think for every author, unless you are a prolific writer, there's some people. Uh, uh, there's a guy named I think his name is John Grisham.
Right.
Guy. I mean, that guy has written 100 books, and many of them have turned out to be bestsellers in best-selling books, and also TV shows and movies. I should say they turned into movies. A couple that come to mind was the Pelican Brief that Denzel Washington was in, and then he wrote the book, the movie that Samuel Jackson was in. I think it's called A Time to Kill. I didn't realize that. I watched those movies many times, and I didn't realize that John Grisham wrote them. But here's the point: the most difficult part is always finding time to write.
Okay.
Finding time to put pen to paper or to type, because there's so much going on. You living your daily lives. Some people are working. I'm fortunate that I'm retired. So there were times when I could isolate time on my back porch and just say, I'm not going to watch any TV for a few hours or whatever. And, I would sit out and write. So it's really finding time that you must set aside. And the reason why I say you must set aside, because you will never complete a book until you consistently, constantly set aside time to write. Now, for some people, that may be early in the morning, could be late at night, depending on your schedule. For some people, it's in the middle of the night. They get up and start writing. But you have to take time. You have to block time to write. And that's really, I would say, is the toughest thing about writing a book is making sure that you carve out the time, because no one's going to carve it out for you, and no one's going to write the book for you. You got to get out, set that time and start writing.
Let's flip the coin over on the other side. If you talk to us about finding the time as being the most difficult part, what part of writing this book did you find to be the most fun, or where did you really enjoy? You just got that thrill out of.
Yeah, I would say in terms of chapters, the first chapter was, I think, the most enjoyable writing, because it talks about mastering your gifts. And anytime that I was here's so let me answer this way. I enjoyed writing about David because, again, grandma named me that, and it gave me an opportunity to tell everyone about him as I saw him. And because when you read this book, I don't know of anybody that you'll come across who has written a book and they've written it the way that I have written about David. Some people focus just on the giant aspect, but I kind of went through several different character traits, because that's what I saw. I saw David having 6 or 7 different character traits that I argue that was his cause for victory. And I believe, and their principles as well. And I believe that if people would implement these character traits, these principles in their lives, that will help them to be a champion as well.
I want to ask this question, and I'm like you, born in March, a little later on up in the year, a little further closer this way. But so I want to ask this question as a March baby. When we complete something great in our lives, when we accomplish something, it's just human nature for us to look back on our lives and say, wow, I did something great. I accomplished something. I finished something. And for me, it may be different individuals based on different accomplishments, but you have a tendency to say, wow, if only my brother had been here to see this. Did you go through that?
Well, I would say yes. I mean, I don't. The only person that I would say I wish they could have been here is like my grandmother.
Okay.
But the only real. I mean, listen, we all lose people, but when I look back, I am very excited about what I've done, the life that I've lived, the things that I've accomplished. I would have loved for my grandmother to have seen me today, Fortunately, she did see a lot of things that happened in my life. I remember when I graduated college, she was present. And when I got married, she was present. So those things were great to see and to have happened in my life. But when I look back and some of the things I've done, there are times when I think that I could have done more. I think a lot of people feel that way because maybe if I had been more dedicated, or maybe if I had started earlier, maybe if I didn't get sidetracked with this, that, or the other, I could have done some things. But overall, I'm pleasantly pleased with how the Lord has blessed my life.
All right. A lot of books, most books or writings, they flow. They have a flow to it, and they're inspirational. Did your book have any parts of it that was challenging? Was there any perspectives or beliefs that you challenged that you happen to challenge people with in your book?
Well, I believe that the thing that I have challenged people to do is to look within themselves to understand that that success is within you. And it doesn't matter who you are, where you come from. I remember closing out the book to say, you don't have to be named David or have grown up with David as your model for success. Whoever you are, God has made you a winner and God has made you a champion. But it doesn't just happen on its own. You have to be motivated. You have to encourage yourself and say that I can. And one of the things that I think the enemy of our soul, which is really a giant in our lives because he's constantly attempting to keep us from achieving, he tries to make us not see ourselves as we are. And if I can encourage this audience that I'm talking to, sometimes we look at ourselves and we convince ourselves that we are not enough. Whether that's because of the background we come from, the upbringing we had things like an absent father or somebody may have been abused. I believe that whatever has happened to you in your life, it's really your advantage in life. It's really the thing that if you see it not as a deficiency or something that came to destroy you, but if you see it as something to be, I guess, not necessarily inspired by, but something to win because of, you will find yourself more in the winner circle than not. So many people see themselves, and again, here's this example of David. David, a lot of people underestimate David because he was small, he was ready, and so many people say, well, I wouldn't want to be that particular person. I wouldn't want to be the underdog. But that's because they can't see the advantages of being the underdog. And David won because he utilized every single advantage that he had. Whether they said he was too young, advantage. They say that he didn't have the experience to fight Goliath, advantage. When Saul tried to put his armor on David, David said, I can't fight with that because that would then put me at a disadvantage. So David lived his life by working through everything that he was. He didn't try to be anybody else. And that's what I'm trying to encourage people to be. Don't be anyone else. Whatever your life is, allow that to be your advantage in life, and you can win with that.
Wow. Normally you've been on most of my shows that I was doing before with video tapings, and so you're familiar with this saying. I always said Denzel Washington asked that question. He said, explain it to me like I'm a 6-year-old in the movie Philadelphia. So explain it to me like I'm a 6-year-old. I walk up to you and I say, hey, you're Dr. David Walker. Tell me something about your book. Tell us about that book real quickly like I'm a 6-year-old. Just break it down just like I'm a child. What was your book about? If you could sum it up in a sentence or two.
My book is about, and I consider it like a self-help, personal development book to help you to see that that there is a winner inside of you. And there's no reason for you to be in second place to anyone. You can win. You can be a champion. And I use the biblical character David and certain principles in his life where he shows us how he was a winner. And you can take those same principles and apply them to your life, and it will help you to stand on a table like Michael Jordan with all of those 6 championships and say that I am a winner.
Are you planning or considering a sequel?
I am. The Champion's Mind. I intend to. Right now, I'm thinking about the Champion's Mind and doing a men's edition.
Wow.
This particular book is a little bit more broad. I kind of speak to a broader audience, whether you're male or female. You can take this book and you can read it and find the champion within yourself. But I think that my next assignment, I want to do the Champion's Mind. Even if I keep the same title, the Champion's Mind, How to Defeat Giants and Win, then I might just say Men's Edition. Mm-hmm. And then if I did that, which I have it on my list, I'm looking at a list of different choices that I intend to do down the road. I got, diversity, inclusion, corporate leadership, different things. But I want to do a men's edition because I feel like I need to talk to men, because a lot of times men, and of course, especially Black men, we're losing in a lot of areas. Mm-hmm. And I need for Black men to know that that there's a champion in you. And no matter what has happened in your life, you have to learn how to use that as your advantage. And as long as you maintain your advantage in life, and that is whatever's happened to you, you are who you are. That's your advantage over everyone else. That's how you win. So don't blame this person, blame that person, blame the system. Yeah, we're Black and we have not had the best of life. But guess what? I'm going to use everything that has been done against me for my favor.
Final question for you, Dr. Walker. How did you celebrate when you finished your book?
I think I ran around the house about 5 or 6 times. Well, of course, you definitely have to celebrate by thanking God that he gave you the ability to and the mind to put this put pen to paper and put this book out in the world for people to see. Of course, I pray that God gets the glory out of it, but also pray that lives can be changed just by reading this book and seeing how there's so many illustrations that I put in the book of other people who are winners. Why do you have the gift that you have? What is the purpose for it? God wants you to prosper with that gift, and the better you can solve other people's problems, or the better that you'll succeed. And so celebration is really just being grateful that I had the opportunity that on this day that I am an author. I don't have to give it back. You know what I'm saying?
That's right.
I don't
That's
have
right.
to give it back because the book is there, and people can buy it. My name is on it. It took. I went through a lot to get it done, even a name change and different things, and rewriting and editing. But if you stick with it, you will come out on the other side a winner.
What can you say to someone that is aspiring to be a writer? Is it difficult, or is it something that, what would you say is the first steps that we need to do if we wanted to be a writer? We know that it's more than just because as I asked you, how did you celebrate? I immediately thought about the movie Misery, in which he always celebrated with.
Yeah, exactly.
He celebrated with what was it? A bottle of champagne, Dom Perignon.
Dom Perignon.
He had some Dom, and he had a cigar or something.
Cigarette. I think a cigarette. Yeah. Yep.
Until his leg.
Absolutely.
And I was laughing because I was thinking about that. But then when you said you ran around the house, I said, well, Paul Sheldon didn't do that after she broke his leg.
No, he did not. To answer your question, I think that anyone that is an aspiring author, the first thing is that you have to want to be one. And it's more than just an inspiration to be an author. You have to decide that that's what you want to do. And not just so you can have your name on the book, because I know plenty of people who got their name on the book and just threw it out there, just to have their name on the book and say, I'm an author. But if you really truly want to be an author, you have to say, that's what I want to do. I want to write a book, and in some way, depending on what the genre is, the category is, I want to impact the lives of other people through my writing and through my inspiration. And I think that once you decide that that's what you want to be, and you're not going to change your mind about it, because I know a lot of people say, I want to write, and then they never write. They never, they either get started and don't finish, or they never get started at all. Mm-hmm. But you got to decide. And I want to kind of close on this. In the book, in my acknowledgement section, I acknowledge a woman, and when I was in New York a couple of weeks ago and we had the book launch, she was present. I had invited her to this book launch because I wanted to make a public announcement. And the public announcement was, about 25 years ago, this woman called me over and she said, you should be writing books. And I believe that you're going to be an author and you're going to write books. Wow. And for the past 25 years, she never knew this, I have kept those words in my heart, that one day I was going to be an author. And as I was putting this book together and as I was finishing, I said, I'm going to put her in the acknowledgments. And then at the book launch, I'm going to make a public announcement that this woman here, this sainted woman of God, said to me 25 years ago, I was going to be an author and I will write books. And I said to that audience, today I'm an author because her word has come to pass. And she said to me, she's like in her mid 80s. She said, I've added 10 more years to her life.
Wow. Well, tell us in the couple of minutes we have left, how do we get our hands on the book? And,
sure.
And how do we contact you if we want to talk to you about possibly helping us understand the book or possibly writing ourselves?
Sure. So to get the book, we're asking people to go to my website. It's Dr. Walker Speaks. That's drwalkerspeaks.com. drwalkerspeaks.com. And you'll find a link there under the books. There's a link at the top where you click books and go right down to where the book section is. You'll see the book. You click the link. You'll purchase the book, and I will send you an autographed copy with my signature on it, and I'll send a nice message to you. That's what we're asking people to do now. That helps me when people go directly to my website versus allowing, I am on Amazon, but if you want an autographed copy, go right to the website, drwalkerspeaks.com. Order the book, and you can order as many as you want. If I had somebody that said that they wanted to get 30 books from me. I said, praise the Lord.
Wow. Well, thank you, Doc. We're out of time. I wish we could talk. Thank you so much for spending time with us, my friend. I really appreciate you.
Sure. Thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Well, we're out of time, but certainly we are so thankful for Dr. David Walker for joining us, my lifelong friend and buddy. Took time out of his busy schedule to be with us, and we certainly appreciate Dr. Walker, and we are so proud of him, proud of his accomplishments, and proud of what he is about to do in the future. We're excited about his new book, The Champion's Mind: How to Defeat Giants and Win. Pick your copy up. Get in touch with Dr. Walker and get your signed autographed copy of that book. Well, friends, I hear the music playing, which means that we are pulling him to the station, but certainly it's not the last time that we'll be in the station. You have an opportunity to jump back on the underground subway train We want to again thank you for taking time to listen to this edition, in which we interview one of the up-and-coming authors and someone who has inspired all of us with his story and with his depiction of one of the most iconic biblical characters of all times, David. Pick up a copy of The Champion's Mind, How to Defeat Giants and Win. And remember what Dr. Walker said. We all want victory. We all want to win, but you can't have a victory. You cannot win except you have an opponent. This was a powerful interview. Thank you for listening to us. And I want to challenge you on the way out. I want to challenge you on your way off the train. When you get home, when you get ready to go to bed tonight, find a mirror, look yourself in the eye, and ask yourself a question. Today, did I do something to defeat the giants in my life? Or did I simply waste another day? We'll see you next time right here on the Underground Subway. I am David Austin. I'm your host. I appreciate you. Have a great day today and an even better tomorrow. We'll see you next time.